So I'd like to now move on and invite one of our other younger scholars to say a few words. This is Vivek, who some of you may know, but Vivek is a philosophy scholar and a politics and economics scholar as well. And in addition to that, he's a yogacharya and has been practicing yoga since the age of 14, and I believe has been given, granted or recognized as a Yoga Shiromani as well. So Vivek, if you'd like to join us up here and then share your scholarly young ideas.
Sit down, it's very nice, which I wasn't expecting. So I'm going to try to keep this a bit more light, a bit more relaxed. The topic I've been given, I'm supposed to talk to you today about Hindu scholarship, and in particular what it is about Hindu scholarship and Hindu scholars that make them different. I think a good way of describing this difference is maybe to talk about what it takes to be a Hindu scholar, the training that's involved with becoming a Hindu scholar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of the steps. I'm going to talk about some of the steps that are necessary for a person to pass through before they're eligible to engage in traditional Hindu scholarship. While I do that, I'm also trying to give some sense of why I think this sort of training and this sort of knowledge is so important and relevant, especially in this day and age. So, in our Dummy's Guide to Hindu Scholarship, step 1, purify the mind. A Hindu scholar has a pure mind. Now, what does that actually mean? Purify the mind. From the moment we're born, we're being fed lots of information. We read things in the newspaper, we see things on TV, we hear things on the radio, our friends are telling us things, our family are telling us things, our parents are always telling us things, and all this information gets filed away in our heads, regardless of whether you're consciously aware of it or not. Now what tends to happen is after a time, the information that you have stored in your head starts to have an impact on how you think. It has an impact on how you behave and how you act without you knowing it. The influence of this information which is already stored, this conditioning, can be very detrimental to scholarly work. There's a good analogy I've actually heard being used in this context once before. Imagine a glass. So I've got this crystal glass here, and imagine the inside of the glass is caked with mud. If I was to pour crystal clear water into this glass, it doesn't matter how clean the water is. As soon as it goes in the glass, it will become dirty. In the same way, that the water that comes out of this glass once I pour it out is going to be dirty. What a human mind produces is naturally coloured by the contents of that mind already. And so a Hindu scholar needs to work to clear this influence away. Now you'd be surprised how much this influences us on a day-to-day basis. Let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, my mum went to New York. She was there to meet a few friends. And while she was there, she went exploring, went for a walk, and ended up in Harlem. And was enjoying the sights and sounds. And as she was looking around, she noticed that to her right-hand side, slightly behind her, there was an African-American man walking in the same direction. Didn't think much of it. She carried on walking. A few minutes more passed, and she had another occasion to look around, and again noticed, couldn't help but notice, that this guy was still there. In fact, now he was actually a lot closer to where she was standing. A full 5 minutes passed, and it occurred to her to think, I wonder where that guy's gone, is he still walking in the same direction? And she turned around to face him directly in the face. He had pulled level to my mum. Now this guy was a big guy, 6'3", 6'4", was wearing very baggy clothes, his jeans were a lot lower than they should be, and had a gold chain around his neck. And as my mum looked at him, he turned around and he looked at her and smiled, showing off his golden teeth. And as he smiled, he looked down at her handbag and reached into his pocket, inside his jacket. Now if you freeze the scene there, right, I think most of us would come to the same conclusion about what we think was going to happen next. What actually happened was quite unexpected. So this guy reached into his pocket, smiling at my mum, and took out a packet of biscuits and offered my mother a biscuit. And I'm fairly sure none of us would have expected that to happen. What we would have expected to have happened is a result of what we've learned, the information we've taken in, our conditioning. And it causes us to jump to conclusions and prejudge situations when we don't have the facts. So this is one thing that a Hindu scholar needs to be very aware of. His mind needs to be pure. Step 2, how the mind actually works, how it processes information, the mechanics of how it comes to a decision. It needs to be regulated, controlled, and moderated if you want to be a true Hindu scholar. Let me give you an example. Our mind has certain ways of working, certain attributes. One of these is it's very good at making links. The Yoga Vashisht describes this attribute quite well with an image. Imagine there's a coconut tree and there's a crow flying around on top of the coconut tree. After a while, the crow gets tired and lands on the coconut tree. A split second after the crow lands, a coconut falls off the tree. Though technically, those are two completely separate events, the crow landing on the tree and the coconut falling from the tree. Our minds, the way they work, they see relationships. It'd be quite conceivable for someone to look at that situation and think it was the crow that landed on the tree which caused the coconut to fall, even though that might not be the case. So this is something else the mind does. It sees relationships, makes patterns where there are none. Another interesting thing the mind does, you can feed it all sorts of illogical, irrational information, and it will try to make it real to you. It will try to show you what it looks like. It's quite hard to explain this actually, so maybe I can demonstrate it a bit better. There's a nonsense poem I learned at school, and I'm just going to recite the first 4 lines of it, just to give you an idea. One fine day in the middle of the night, 2 dead men got up to fight. Back to back they faced each other, drew their swords and shot each other. Now I'm not entirely sure what one fine day in the middle of the night actually looks like, but still somehow my mind has managed to create some sort of image. I can still kind of roughly picture the scene. I shouldn't be able to, none of it makes any sense, it's completely contradictory, it does not compute. But still, the mind has this ability to do this. And this is something else which trips us up in our day-to-day lives. Another thing, which I'm sure most of you can relate to, is our minds are out of control. We jump from one thought to the next, to the next, to the next. And even those of us who think our minds are in our control, we don't have that much control over our thoughts, not as much as we think. For example, if I was to tell you not to think about something, right, I'm going to say something and I don't want you to think about it. Try your best not to think about it. The thing I don't want you to think about is a pink elephant, right? Now, from me saying pink elephant to you thinking pink elephant, the link was so fast, you didn't even get a chance to see whether the external stimuli matched up with what was going on in your head. It just happened automatically. If you're engaged in true scholarly work, these links need to be interrogated. You need to be aware of this going on, and you need to be able to control it when necessary. Now, it's obvious how this is important for scholarship. Just imagine if you're pursuing scholarly work and the links you're seeing aren't really there. The conclusions you're jumping to on the basis of what you've experienced, random events that have happened to you in your life, as opposed to the facts as they're presented to you. Just think about the amount of misinformation that can be spread. This is why these first 2 steps are important. Step 3, and this is probably the last step I'll go over today. It's quite interesting. Step 3 almost automatically seems to happen by itself once you master the first 2 steps. And step 3 is all about developing a sensitivity to how and when to use the knowledge you gain. Now this is very important. Obviously, certain types of knowledge are intended for certain audiences. You wouldn't teach an 11+ student A-level physics. It just wouldn't make sense, it wouldn't be appropriate. But just imagine, just think for a moment, if instead of scholarship we were talking about military policy, or economics, international relations, medicine, health. If you're making decisions on the basis of your conditioning, even if you're making decisions which are based partially on the facts but are still influenced by your conditioning, the amount of damage you could cause is huge. And this is something that Hindu scholars have to be very, very careful of. How many of our leaders do you reckon have gone through this sort of training? I think it's also interesting. This knowledge is not just for our leaders. This is vitally important for each and every one of us. If you're not in control of your mind, you're a victim to it. I think the question we really need to ask ourselves is, if you're not in control of your mind, who actually is. There are some people out there who understand little bits and pieces of this knowledge. They know that if they present you with certain images, certain bits of information, you'll make certain links and jump to certain conclusions. These conclusions would have been pre-designed and pre-arranged by them. Media houses, marketing firms, PR agencies. We also hear an awful lot these days on the news about brainwashing, radicalization, and things like that. These sorts of things only happen to people who haven't been through this type of training. Voltaire said, if you can convince people of absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities. And so knowledge, especially this type of knowledge, is very powerful. And with great power comes great responsibility, to quote Spider-Man. And I think responsibility brings me nicely on to the last point I'd like to make about what's distinctive about Hindu scholars. It's this sense of responsibility that comes with knowledge. The idea, the concept of adhikari. This is the sense that someone needs to have done a certain amount of work, a certain amount of preparation before they are ready to receive certain types of knowledge. It's vitally important, because if someone is not prepared, just think, they could misunderstand, they could miscommunicate the knowledge, and perhaps worse, they could intentionally misuse it. Let me give you one final example, just to demonstrate how this can go wrong. So most of us have seen a Shivaling in this room. Now, one interpretation of what a Shivaling symbolizes, stands for, is that it's a 3D representation of formless, infinite potential. When you think about it, it's quite kind of simple. You look at the shape of a Shivaling, it's featureless. But if a sculptor was to look at it, he'd be able to see whatever he wanted in it. He'd be able to create it into anything he wanted. It contains anything and everything. Now let's say, for example, imagine I'm a Western scholar, or Hindu Doniga, sorry. And I walk into a mandir one day, and I see this Shivaling, and I think, I wonder what this stands for. And I think about it for a while, and then I think, I know what this is. This is obviously a phallic symbol. Now, after having heard about some of the tricks the mind can play, I'm sure you'll agree with me that in some cases, this says an awful lot more about the person seeing rather than that which is being seen. As they say, Jaisi Dishti, Vaisi Srishti. The knowledge of how to become such a scholar is so valuable in and of itself, let alone the fruits of such scholarship. I'm confident that this board will help us share and spread our knowledge, and also prevent it from being miscommunicated and misunderstood and misinterpreted by untrained minds. If anyone would like to have a chat about this, I'll be happy to talk. I'll be around afterwards. But please do be aware, I will be keeping an eye on how your mind works. That usually keeps people away. Thank you very much.
The pursuit of Hinduism